I was walking with my girlfriend, just another quiet evening by the river, until a stranger stopped, looked straight at me, and said, "I don't mind getting to know you." I laughed it off at first, but that one moment never really left my head. I didn't know it then, but a single sentence was about to change everything. Hello, you're watching True Lean, real stories with real twists. Let's get started. I'm Jacob. I'm 28 and I work as a loans and credit consultant at a neighborhood bank branch. It's not glamorous, but it's honest and steady. And most days I like helping people figure out how to breathe a little easier with their money. I rent a one-bedroom in a quiet part of town, 10 minutes from the riverfront. My life is predictable in a way that used to feel safe. My girlfriend is Rebecca. She's 29 and teaches second grade. We've been together 3 years. She has this calm, patient energy she wears like a sweater, even when her day has chewed her up. The Friday this story starts, she texted me, "Let's do the river walk tomorrow. I need outside." I said yes without checking anything else because that's what we do. We make small plans and keep them. Saturday evening felt cooler than the forecast promised. The path along the water was busy with strollers, joggers, and couples who didn't look like they'd ever argued about anything. We grabbed coffees from a cart that always parks by the old stone steps, the kind where the sleeve still feels too thin against your fingers. Rebecca told me a story about a kid in her class who insisted the plural of moose was me. I laughed and said it should be if that makes life easier. We'd had a small disagreement that morning. She'd asked casually, but not casually, "Have you ever thought about when we might get engaged?" I'd said something about timing, money, the apartment, my promotion that never seems to land. The conversation drifted into errands and laundry, but it left a wrinkle in the day. On the walk, I tried to smooth it out with light jokes and future talk. Hikes we could do, a cheap beach in September, maybe a new couch if the landlord ever replaces the carpet. She nodded and smiled, and I could tell she was trying too. Golden hour laid itself across the river like a thin sheet. A street violinist near the overlook pulled long, warm notes from a song I couldn't place. We stopped by the railing and watched a small boat drag a gentle wake. I remember thinking, this is what normal looks like. This is what we've built. Then it happened. She stepped into our path like she had the right to the moment. Early 30s, dark hair pulled back, a light dress that caught the breeze, the kind of posture that says she's never had to repeat herself. She looked at me, not Rebecca, and said with an easy smile, "I don't mind getting to know you." I felt my face heat the way you do when your name gets called unexpectedly. Rebecca's hand stiffened on my arm. I cleared my throat and said the first true thing available. "I'm with my girlfriend." The woman didn't flinch. She glanced at Rebecca, nodded respectfully, then back at me. "Right, my mistake," she said like it really was. She took a half step to go around us. For a second, I was relieved it would end as quickly as it began. We started walking again. Rebecca squeezed my arm once, not hard, and made a small noise I couldn't read. I said, "That was weird," trying to keep it light. She said, "People are bold," without looking at me, then pointed ahead at a dog wearing a bandana. We both laughed at the dog because it was easier. I didn't notice the paper until later. The first hint was the feeling of something crisp against my thigh when I shifted my phone in my pocket. Back at the apartment, I dropped my keys in the bowl and reached in for my wallet, and a small folded square fell to the rug with a whisper. I picked it up without thinking. Rebecca was in the kitchen, rinsing blueberries in a metal colander, the water making that soft hiss against fruit. I unfolded it, a 10-digit number. No name, no heart, no smiley face. Nothing cute to soften it. Just the number written in neat, quick handwriting and underlined once. My chest did a strange thing. Not excitement, not dread. More like the feeling you get when a door you didn't ask for swings open. I looked toward the kitchen. Rebecca was humming quietly, the same melody she hums when she's tired and trying to stay kind. I folded the note again and set it on the dresser next to my watch, as if it were a receipt I'd deal with later. At dinner, we ate roasted chicken and potatoes and watched a rerun of a show we pretend we haven't already seen. We talked about a field trip her class might take to the Science Museum. I told her a story about a couple at the bank refinancing to help their kids start a landscaping business. Normal talk, good talk. But I kept touching my pocket like the note was still there. It wasn't. It was 10 feet away, inside a quiet piece of paper that somehow made the room feel less quiet. When we went to bed, Rebecca fell asleep fast because teachers do. I lay awake longer, the way an old TV stays warm even after you've turned it off. I wasn't planning on anything. I told myself that more than once. Still, I reached for the dresser in the dark, found the square by feel, and slid it into my wallet. I told myself it was so I could throw it out tomorrow with the junk mail. I told myself a lot of things. Before sleep finally found me, I saw the river again, the violinist, the gold light, and the way the stranger hadn't been cruel or mocking or needy, just direct. I'm not proud that I replayed it. I'm just telling you exactly how it happened. The next morning started the same way as most Sundays. Coffee, eggs, a quiet kitchen. Rebecca wore one of my hoodies and hummed while scrolling through lesson plans on her tablet. The air between us was calm again, almost too calm, like the moment after a storm when you're not sure if it's really over. I told myself yesterday's incident meant nothing. People flirt sometimes. It doesn't have to mean more. But every time I reached for my wallet, the small fold of paper pressed against my thoughts. It wasn't loud, it didn't demand attention, it just sat there, a quiet question I hadn't answered yet. By afternoon, Rebecca suggested visiting her parents for dinner. I agreed instantly. Anything that made life feel normal again sounded right. The visit was routine, polite questions about work, talk about their garden, the same family stories I'd already heard 3 times. I smiled, nodded, played the part of the stable boyfriend. But in the back of my head, something kept whispering, throw it away. That night after we got home, Rebecca fell asleep early. The TV played one of those renovation shows she loves. I muted it halfway through and just sat there, wallet open, staring at that folded square like it was staring back. I unfolded it again. The handwriting was clean, slanted slightly to the right, confident like the woman who'd written it. I don't know why I looked at it for so long. Maybe I wanted to understand what she saw when she stopped us on that sidewalk. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't tempted. At 11:07 p.m., I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen for almost a full minute. Then I typed, I don't know why I'm texting you. I stared at the message, half expecting to delete it, but I didn't. I hit send. A few seconds later, the screen lit up. Because you want to know what would happen if you did. My pulse jumped for a moment. I didn't move. The glow from the phone lit my face, the rest of the apartment completely still except for the faint hum of the fridge. I locked the phone and put it down, but my mind didn't slow. What did that even mean? What would happen if you did? Did she say this to everyone? Was it a game? I told myself I wouldn't reply. 10 minutes passed, I replied, you caught me off guard yesterday, that's all. She answered almost instantly. You seemed honest. I like that. Something about that line felt both harmless and dangerous. I typed a few words back, something neutral, but deleted it before sending. Then I turned off the phone, placed it face down, and lay beside Rebecca. She shifted in her sleep and murmured my name, her arm brushing against mine. The guilt hit like static electricity, sudden, small, but sharp. Monday at work, I was distracted. I processed loans, smiled at customers, nodded at coworkers. But every so often, I'd think of that text thread hiding quietly in my phone. During lunch, I checked it again. No new messages. I felt relief, then disappointment, both at once. That evening, Rebecca met me outside the bank. She'd brought sandwiches and we ate on a bench across the street. She told me about a student who refused to color inside the lines and how she secretly admired that. I laughed, but my attention kept wandering. She caught it once and asked softly, you okay? I said, I was just tired. Back home, I sat at the table while she graded papers. The phone buzzed once, barely noticeable. I froze. When she got up to make tea, I unlocked it. You must really love her, Charlotte had written. I typed, I do. After a pause, she replied, then you don't have to explain why you texted me. That line did something strange to me. It wasn't a challenge, it was understanding. Like she knew exactly how tangled a person could be between curiosity and loyalty. Over the next few days, her name stayed in my messages like a quiet echo. We didn't talk every day, but every conversation left a trace. She asked about my job, my city, the music I liked. She never flirted directly. That made it worse, more intimate somehow. By Thursday, I realized I hadn't told Rebecca a single new thing all week. I listened to her stories, nodded in the right places, but part of me was elsewhere, and that part scared me. Friday evening after Rebecca went to meet a friend, I drove aimlessly through the city, the kind of drive you take when you're trying not to think, but thinking anyway. I parked near the riverfront, the same place where it all began. I sat there with the windows down, the sound of water mixing with the noise of passing cars. I pulled out my phone again. The chat with Charlotte sat near the top of the screen. My thumb hovered over it. "You still at the bank?" She texted out of nowhere as if she knew. "No," I replied. "Just driving." "You always sound like you're somewhere between staying and leaving." I stared at those words until they blurred. For the first time, I realized she wasn't entirely wrong. I was drifting, not toward her, not away from Rebecca, just somewhere uncertain in between. When I finally got home, Rebecca was asleep on the couch, the TV still on. I sat beside her, gently brushed her hair from her face, and felt something twist in my chest. I wanted to be the man she believed I was, but a small, restless piece of me kept asking questions I couldn't answer. That night, I dreamed about the river again, how the light hit it, how Charlotte's voice sounded when she said those words. When I woke up, my first instinct wasn't guilt. It was confusion at how quickly an ordinary life can start to bend. On Saturday morning, I woke before Rebecca and lay still, watching the ceiling fan tug the air. I had the feeling of being late to something even though there was nowhere to be. My phone was on the nightstand face down, but I could feel it in the room like a low. When Rebecca stirred, I closed my eyes and pretended I was just waking up too. We made coffee, talked about groceries, and moved around each other in the kitchen the way people do who know each other's steps. Around noon, she left for a teacher supply store with a colleague. I stayed behind, telling her I'd catch up on laundry and bills. As the door closed, the apartment changed temperature. I picked up my phone and opened the thread with Charlotte as if it were a window letting in weather I couldn't name. "Morning," I typed. "Weird question. Do you ever think about why you said that to me?" A few minutes later. "Because I liked your face," she wrote, "and the way you said you were with your girlfriend without apology or performance. Most people either brag or hide." I tried to laugh at that and couldn't. I paced to the sink, filled the glass, sat, stood again, and sat. My thumbs moved before my head decided. "You don't know me." That's the point of getting to know someone. I put the phone down and folded towels with more precision than they deserved. When I checked again, a second message. "And relax, I'm not trying to blow up your life." I stared at the words. Something in me wanted to believe her because it made my choices sound less like choices. We traded small facts. She sold condos and townhomes, said she liked the look on people's faces when they imagined their couches in empty rooms. She ran early before the sidewalks heated up. She was divorced, no kids, good marriage for 4 years. Bad for 2, she wrote. We ended it before we could hate each other. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "Not looking, just living, curiosity, new conversations, light where it's been dark." It was strangely gentle, like the way a nurse asks your name before a shot. I answer questions about my job I usually avoid. I told her I sometimes like being the calm person across the desk, but sometimes I feel like a sponge for everyone else's decisions. She sent a reply I didn't expect. "You sound like someone who carries more than he admits." To himself, I mean. I locked the phone and exhaled. The washing machine clicked to a stop. Life demanded something small and ordinary, and I did it. And none of it fixed the fact that a stranger felt like she'd walked into a room I thought was mine. When Rebecca came home, she dumped shopping bags on the table and showed me a set of dry erase markers like it was a prize. "They finally restocked the good ones," she said. I smiled and asked about her friend. She watched me for a second longer than normal and then kissed my cheek. "You're quiet today," she said. "I didn't sleep great," I said. It was true and not the whole truth. That evening, we went to a birthday dinner for one of her coworkers. At the restaurant, I kept my phone in my pocket like a live wire. I told myself I wouldn't look. I lasted 40 minutes. In the bathroom, under the strained lighting, I checked. "Hope your day is soft," Charlotte had written earlier. For no good reason, the word soft undid me. I typed back something harmless about errands and laundry and the kind of dinner where everyone tells the same three stories. She replied with a photo of a sunset through a parking garage. A narrow strip of orange captured between concrete slabs. Found beauty in a dumb place, she wrote. Back at the table, I laughed at a joke someone told and felt like a person performing a version of me. On the ride home, Rebecca leaned her head on the window and said, "Can we do nothing tomorrow?" I said yes and man mad in that moment. I wanted nothing more than silence and a couch and not having to choose anything. Sunday, we did exactly that. We cooked pasta, watched an old movie, and fell asleep in the mid-afternoon with the blinds drawn. My phone stayed on the coffee table, screen dark. When the light shifted and woke us, Rebecca tucked her feet under my thigh and said, "Jake, everything okay?" The question was soft, not suspicious, and it made my chest ache. "Yeah," I said. "Work's been strange. People keep bringing in problems I can't solve." She nodded like that made sense and rested her head against my shoulder. She didn't ask about my phone. I wish she had. I wished I had told her everything right then, let it flare and burn out. Instead, I kept the quiet like a secret pet. That night, after dishes and lesson plans, after setting out my shirt for Monday, I found myself in the bedroom doorway watching Rebecca highlight a stack of worksheets. She looked small in concentration, the way people do when they're absorbed by a task no one else will notice. My phone buzzed in the other room. She didn't look up. That felt like permission. It wasn't. In the kitchen, I read, "I'm grabbing coffee near the park at noon tomorrow between showings. No pressure. If you want to say hello, say hello." I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. I tried to imagine the future with and without that coffee. In one version, and I delete the thread and tell Rebecca I'm sorry about being distant, and we reset. In another, I go and discover it's nothing, and I come back and the moment passes. In both versions, I get to pretend I'm still the person I think I am. I did not decide that night. I slept badly and dreamed of stairwells with no doors. Monday morning, I moved through my routine like a checklist I had to finish before something else began. At the bank, I smiled at a couple transferring a balance. I called a man to tell him his application was approved. I signed my name on a stack of forms until the letter stopped looking like mine. At 11:48, I checked the time and realized I'd been watching the minute hand all morning. At 11:55, I texted 10 minutes. "I'll be on the bench near the fountain," she replied. I locked my computer, told Martia I was stepping out, and walked toward the park with the certainty of someone making a mistake he intends to own later. The air felt warmer than the forecast. The fountain sprayed fine mist that cooled the edges of my face. I saw her before she saw me. A white blouse, hair tucked behind one ear, a paper cup in both hands like she was keeping them warm. From 20 feet away, I slowed. I could still turn around. No one had seen me. The bench was just a bench. The moment before a moment is sometimes the freest a person ever feels. She looked up and smiled like I'd arrived exactly on time. She stood up as I approached, the sound of the fountain masking the rest of the city. Charlotte looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more human. A few loose strands of hair framed her face. And when she smiled, it wasn't the kind of smile meant to tempt. It was a real one, the kind people use when they already know what they're about to say might change something. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Hey," I answered. I wanted to sound casual, but it came out cautious. We sat down on the bench. The wooden slats were warm from the sun. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A family passed behind us, their kids throwing bread to pigeons. The world was moving normally, even though inside me everything felt off balance. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said finally. "Neither did I admitted. She laughed quietly, then took a sip of her coffee. "You seem like someone who doesn't break rules easily." "I don't," I said. "Or at least I didn't." She studied me for a second. "Relax, we're just talking. I'm not here to steal you." The way she said it made me breathe again. We talked at first about ordinary things. Work, traffic, favorite movies, the best coffee shops downtown. Nothing heavy, nothing personal. Yet somehow every sentence felt like a small confession. Charlotte had a calm, magnetic way of listening. She wasn't trying to impress. She was just present. When she laughed, it wasn't forced. When she asked questions, they weren't polite. They were curious. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of attention until that moment. At one point, she said, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's version of your life?" I hesitated. "Every now and then." She nodded like she understood perfectly. "I felt that way for years. I was doing everything right. Good job, marriage, routine. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling anything. That's when I knew I needed to change something." Her eyes met mine, steady but kind. "Sometimes good people just get tired of being good all the time." I didn't answer. The words landed somewhere deep where I didn't want them to. I looked down at my coffee cup, now empty, and said quietly, "That's not a good excuse, though." She smiled faintly. "It's not an excuse, it's just the truth." The conversation drifted. We walked a short loop around the park before parting ways. No touch, no exchange of numbers, just a look that lasted longer than it should have. "Take care, Jacob," she said before leaving. "And don't overthink this. Sometimes a conversation is just a conversation." But it didn't feel like just a conversation. Back at the bank, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than usual. I caught myself staring at my reflection in the monitor, wondering if I looked different somehow, like someone who'd crossed an invisible line. When I got home that evening, Rebecca was already there. She'd made pasta and lit a small candle in the middle of the table. It was something she did when she wanted to remind us that we still had rituals. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy," I said, taking off my jacket. She smiled. "Mine too. Sit. I'll serve." I told myself that sitting down at that table meant choosing her, choosing what we'd built. But even as we talked, even as she laughed about something one of her students said, I could feel Charlotte's voice echoing quietly in the back of my mind. After dinner, we watched a show. I can't remember which one, only that Rebecca kept resting her head on my shoulder and I barely noticed. When she fell asleep halfway through, I turned off the TV and looked at her face in the dim light. It hit me then how fragile love becomes when you start hiding even the smallest parts of yourself. Later in the dark, I reached for my phone without knowing why. No new messages. Still, I scrolled back through the old ones with Charlotte, reading them like pages from a book I wasn't supposed to own. Rebecca stirred beside me. "Jake," she mumbled. "Yeah, come to bed," she whispered, half asleep. I slid the phone onto the nightstand and turned off the lamp. Her hand found mine, but my mind was still somewhere else, by the fountain, under the same light that had made everything look too easy. Days passed. I tried to bury the memory, but it had already settled in. Work felt mechanical. Evenings with Rebecca felt rehearsed. I wasn't angry or distant on purpose. It just happened. She started noticing. "You've been quiet lately," she said one night. "I'm just tired," I replied. "You say that a lot," she said softly. "Are you sure it's just that?" I nodded, but my throat tightened. She didn't press further. That was Rebecca's way. Gentle patience even when something was clearly wrong. The next morning, as I left for work, she hugged me longer than usual. "I love you," she said into my chest. I said it back, but it felt delayed, like I was repeating something I used to mean instantly. At the bank, I checked my phone during lunch. Nothing from Charlotte. A strange mix of relief and disappointment hit me again. Around 3:00 p.m., while sorting loan files, I got a single message. "Hey, you look like someone carrying too much. I hope our talk didn't make it worse." I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wrote, "No, it actually helped." "Then I'm glad," she answered. "You seem like a good man, Jacob. Try not to forget that." That night, Rebecca and I ate dinner in silence. She was grading papers. I was pretending to read the news. There wasn't a fight, just the kind of quiet that fills up a room until it's hard to breathe. Before bed, she asked if I wanted to go hiking that weekend. I said maybe. She nodded, trying not to look disappointed. When she turned off the light, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't love I felt for Charlotte. It was something smaller but sharper. Curiosity mixed with regret, a dangerous kind of comfort. I kept thinking of her words. Sometimes good people just get tired of being good. And for the first time, I didn't know which side of that sentence I was on. It was a Tuesday night when everything finally fell apart. The day had been long but ordinary. A few clients at the bank, the same stale office coffee, The same small talk about weekend plans. I came home around 6:30, expecting the quiet hum of our apartment, the faint sound of Rebecca's music from the kitchen. But when I opened the door, it was silent. Her shoes were by the door, her bag on the table, but she wasn't there. I called her name once, twice, no answer. Then I saw my phone on the couch. It wasn't where I'd left it. The screen was dark, but the weight of what had happened hit me before I even turned it on. I didn't need to. When Rebecca came out of the bedroom, her eyes were red. She was holding my phone in her hand, unlocked, the messages open. Charlotte's name at the top of the screen. Her voice shook, but she didn't yell. I trusted you, Jacob. My throat dried instantly. Rebecca. She held up a hand. Don't, just don't. I took a step toward her, but she backed away. Nothing happened, I said. I swear to you, it was just messages. Just that's worse, she interrupted. Because you had to think about it. You had time to stop, and you didn't. There was no arguing with that. I tried anyway. I told her I didn't mean for any of this to happen, that I didn't even understand why I answered Charlotte that first night. But the words sounded thin, like excuses worn out from too much use. Rebecca put my phone on the counter and said quietly, I'm not angry, Jacob. I'm just done trying to guess if you still want to be here. She walked past me, grabbed a small suitcase from the closet, and began to pack. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. Watching her fold her clothes into that suitcase felt like watching a door close in slow motion. When she finally turned to me, she said, You're not a bad man, but you stopped showing up for us a long time ago. Then she left. The door clicked shut. The sound echoed through the apartment, louder than anything I'd heard in weeks. I sat on the couch, phone still glowing on the table. There were new messages. Charlotte, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm sorry. I stared at it until the light dimmed and the screen went black. I didn't reply. I deleted the conversation, then the contact, then the photos we'd exchanged, the coffee, the sunset, the little moments that had felt harmless. But deleting something doesn't erase what had changed. The next few days passed like fog. I went to work, smiled at clients, answered calls, came home to an apartment that sounded different now, empty, echoing. Rebecca sent a message a week later. I moved in with my sister for a while. Please don't text me. I just need space. I typed a dozen responses and never sent any. One evening I found the small paper note again, the one Charlotte had slipped into my pocket that day. It was still folded neatly in the back of my wallet, faintly creased, the ink slightly faded. I unfolded it one last time, stared at the number, and tore it in half, then into smaller and smaller pieces until it was gone. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like cleanup, like sweeping glass shards and still finding splinters. Days later, work became a distraction. I stayed late, volunteered for extra shifts, took on clients no one else wanted. People at the bank started calling me reliable again. That word used to make me proud. Now it just sounded heavy. On weekends, I walked by the riverfront where everything began. The same musicians still played near the railing. Couples still passed, laughing, their hands brushing lightly together. Every time I told myself I'd learned my lesson, that temptation isn't always about desire. Sometimes it's just about wanting to feel seen, and sometimes that's enough to ruin something real. 2 months later, I ran into Charlotte by accident. It was a grocery store parking lot on a Sunday afternoon. She was wearing sunglasses, holding a paper bag of fruit. For a moment, we both froze. She gave me a small, polite smile, the kind you give someone you used to know. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied. Neither of us moved closer. There was nothing left to say. After a pause, she nodded. Take care of yourself, Jacob. You too, I said. And that was it. She walked away, and I didn't watch her leave this time. I drove home in silence. When I walked into the apartment, Rebecca's old candle was still on the shelf where she'd left it, the one she used to light during dinner. I lit it out of habit, and for the first time, the smell hurt. I sat there for a long while staring at the flicker. I didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't text anyone. I just sat in that quiet, finally accepting that sometimes a single moment can split your life into before and after. Charlotte moved on. Rebecca never came back. I didn't blame either of them. Now, when I walk past that same park bench on my way home from work, I still remember the warmth of that day. The sunlight, the sound of the fountain, the woman who looked at me like I was someone worth knowing. But if I could go back, I'd let her walk by. I'd hold Rebecca's hand tighter. I'd throw that note away before I ever unfolded it. Because it wasn't a big betrayal that ended us. It was a small decision, one text, one reply, one moment where I forgot what mattered most. And once you cross that line, even if no one sees you do it, you can't walk back the same. In the golden hush of a river walk, Jacob learned that betrayal rarely arrives with thunder. It slips in as a whisper, a folded note, a single text you'd swear means nothing. Charlotte's quiet curiosity didn't steal his heart. It exposed the cracks already forming in a life he'd stop tending. Rebecca's patient love wasn't fragile because it broke. It was precious because it trusted him to choose it every day. The real wound wasn't desire for someone new. It was the slow drift from the person who already knew his silences. One small, secret hello became 1,000 unspoken goodbyes. The lesson aches because it's universal. Loyalty isn't tested by grand temptations, but by the moments you justify as harmless until the harm is irreversible. Guard the ordinary, because that's where everything real lives. What about you? What folded note have you carried too long? A glance, a message, a curiosity that felt safe until it wasn't? Share your moment of truth in the comments. Your honesty might save someone else from the same quiet fracture. If this hit close, smash subscribe and ring the bell. True Lean brings raw twists every week to remind us the smallest choices echo the loudest. See you in the next story.